You'll need that. You got slides?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No. Well, thank you, and thank you for the invitation, and thank you for using my caricature a little bit earlier. So, very briefly, what I want to say is that I am here as a sort of a token conservative to talk about the problem of conservatives not trusting the media. And if the question is, how do you turn that around? How do you get conservatives to trust the media more? My first answer would be, well, stop digging the hole. Stop making it actually worse. We have a problem of bias, but also I think we have a problem of contempt and a problem of blind spots. By which I mean, and I would strongly urge people to read Arthur Brooks's new book. He says, look, you and I can argue about an issue, and we can have actually a very significant difference of opinion on issues. But the moment I express contempt for you, the moment I dismiss you as a person, the moment I assume that you are dealing in bad faith, we're done. I'm not going to persuade you. And I think that there is a long-term problem of the media having contempt for certain groups. And I'm going to try to put that in some perspective here. There's also another point that I hope we make during this conference that actually came up during one of the night forums that Mizell and I were doing down in Miami, where somebody said, we keep talking about media. Is it time to break apart or distinguish between media and journalism? There are so many media out there that have nothing to do with journalism. And sometimes I think we confuse the terms when we lump in the Washington Post and the New York Times with the people who put the cat videos up on a regular basis. They're not the same thing. And I think that one of the things that you're seeing in Tom's slideshow, the decline in trust among younger people, is a generation that has really not been exposed to journalism, but has been marinating in media. Now, and I want to put some of my comments in context here, because I'm kind of schizophrenic. I would prefer to be described as somebody with a foot in both worlds. I run a center-right website. I'm a contributor to the center-left, far-left MSNBC. I live in different worlds. For 23 years, I was part of this alternative media, a conservative talk show host, who is now not really part of the conservative movement because of Donald Trump. So when I say that I'm schizophrenic, I've experienced what it's like to be a conservative dealing with the media, but find myself appalled by the attacks on the media now. That my experience is to try to explain to people, you can be critical of the media without delegitimizing all fact-based media. And this is one of the problems, that years and years and years of attacks on the media and the media's lack of serious introspection led to this delegitimization of all of media outlets, the idea of facts and truth. And I always hate to be the guy to say this, but as bad as Tom's scenario is, I think it's worse than we realize. Because I think a lot of us think that people use information and facts to determine what is true. But maybe we're not wired that way. Maybe we use facts and information to strengthen our bonds to our tribes. And therefore, we look for things that confirm our bias, that confirm our identity. And think of the world we're living in right now. That you want to believe something, you're one quick click away. You find a fact that is perhaps inconvenient, like the fact that the president lies all the time. You can find a safe space that will assure you that this is not a problem within seconds. So we are in a world where people have alternative reality silos. We've moved from the world that I thought we were creating, which was to have alternative voices, to have alternative realities, alternative issues, alternative narratives. And they're intensely difficult to break through. And this was my experience as a conservative talk show host, that after a while, I would get emails, I would get the tweets of information that I knew was bogus, I knew was hoaxes, and for years I would push back and say, that's not true. Really, let's stick to the actual facts. And for years that actually worked until 2016, when people began to say, you know what, you've sent me an article from the New York Times, or you've sent me an article from the Washington Post, or NPR, or NBC, or factcheck.org, and these are all liberal rags. I don't believe them. so you found it was impenetrable. And I'll also tell you just one experience that I have, and I have tremendous respect for much of the media as it exists now. We are in the best of times and the worst of times, some of the best reporting that we've ever seen in my lifetime, and that includes going back to Watergate. And yet we're also living in a time where 40% of Americans don't believe it or perhaps don't care. They don't caring is actually a little bit more disturbing. So for 23 years when I was a conservative talk show host in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin's a very interesting state politically, and it made a massive transition from left to right. And for that 23 years, I had to deal with the media as a conservative. And let's just say that I worked for a radio station, a television station. We were owned by the newspaper. For about 23 years, they never called me up. They never interviewed me. They never asked, what are conservatives thinking in Wisconsin? Until the morning of March 28th, 2016, when Donald Trump called into my radio show, and we had a rather intense back and forth, okay? I didn't think it was that intense because I thought this is what journalists do. They ask people tough questions, and you get a response. So at 8:30 in the morning, when my radio show began, which was every day for 23 years, at 8:30 in the morning, I was a right-wing radio hack who was completely ignored by the media. By 11 o'clock that morning, I was one of the deepest thinkers in American politics. I've written for the New York Times, the Atlantic. I'm on cable television. People call up and say, what are conservatives thinking about all of this? Which I enjoy. I get it. But I'm also under no illusions that there's a bright line in my life where, like, you have nothing to say that we're interested in versus really tell us more. Now, what changed? Well, obviously, I had become an acceptable conservative and experienced the strange new respect. So what I have experienced is, in the last 3 years, is that I've never been misquoted in the news media. I have never been taken out of context unfairly. I have said some things that I wish I had not said. That's true. But that's on me. And my sense of the sincerity, the intelligence, and the storytelling abilities of the media has never been higher. But I don't forget what it was like when they thought I was one of those conservatives. And so you have to understand how conservatives see it. And I'm sorry I'm going on a little too long. If you were to go, when I started off by saying, what is my advice to the media on getting conservatives back? Stop making it worse and start asking yourself some tough questions. You don't think you're biased. Fish don't think they're wet, okay? If you were to go to conservative media today and say, okay, let's talk about the media, they would say, you remember 3 narratives? I'll just give you 3 narratives. Remember the Covington kids at the Right to Life March? Those with the kids who, became a YouTube sensation? Remember Jussie Smollett when he said he was a victim? Remember Michael Avenatti? Okay. Covington kids, media immediately declared they were guilty of being the worst people in the world. Jussie Smollett was believed as being an innocent victim. Michael Avenatti became this massive media sensation as the hero lawyer. All of those narratives turn out not to be true, and yet they were embraced by the media. Now, of course, among conservative circles, they will also think that much of the coverage of Trump and Russia was unfair. I disagree with that, but I think we're in an environment where the distrust is built in. The sense of bad faith is so built in that it is going to take years, extraordinary effort to restore that trust. Because credibility, once lost, is very different, particularly when no one has to read the daily newspaper. Nobody has to watch CBS News. Nobody has to watch me on Hardball tonight. They just click it off. Once they think you are no longer credible, that's it. That's done. And I also have to say, and I said this at a previous forum, that as much as I love aggressive journalism, and I do think that journalists should be as aggressive as possible in speaking truth to power, but also understand that if you have contempt for certain groups, if you label people that you think of as the bad people, they will tune you out. And I could multiply the examples of that almost endlessly. And so when there's someone like me that comes along and says, Donald Trump lies all the time. Well, why do you say that? Well, look at these stories that he's telling. Well, why should I believe those? Why should I believe the media? Why should I? Who knows what is truth? You know, when Tom's saying, you know, the point of all of this is not to make you believe anything. The point of all of this is to make you think, I don't know what to believe, and so I'll believe the dear leader. And I think that's the dangerous moment we're in. Thank you.
Thank you.